On this episode of Fired Up.
But I think what's happening in California is there is a constant march on gun rights there.
That is, there is a period of at least 10 days in which California prohibits every person from exercising the right to keep and bear arms. That from a federal judge. This case is going.
This case is going up. It's absolutely going to go up.
We're going to be talking about the PPS 43.
Where you're busted by your own mom.
Our panelists include Emily Miller, marketing director from the gun store in Las Vegas, Michael Giles, retired police officer and defense attorney from Creed and Giles, Tony D., retired police officer and firearms instructor from the gun store, Lieutenant Randy Sutton, retired policeman and author, and your host, Bob Irwin from the gun store.
Thanks for tuning in again to Fired Up. I'm your host for the show, Bob Irwin, coming to you from the gun store in Las Vegas. This program is all about guns, politics, and self-defense. On this edition of the show, we're going to talk a little bit about some new California waiting periods that are being challenged. Actually, they're not new. They're being challenged now in court as a Second Amendment case that could affect a lot of other states. Also, another California Department of Justice now has a new rule effective the 1st that says they are required now to retain information on long gun purchases, and dealers need to report long gun purchases to the state. We're also going to address in this show a little bit about gun trusts, and particularly gun trusts that own Class 3 weapons, as we call them, machine guns, silencers, short-barreled rifles, and the problem they seem to cause for local law enforcement. First, I want to talk about this lawsuit. Cal Guns Foundation, among others, have challenged California's 10-day waiting period, which could become a huge Second Amendment case if it goes where it looks like it's going.
And it probably will, since senior judge, federal judge, Anthony Ishii rejected the California Attorney General's petition to dismiss a lawsuit based on their waiting period law as an unconditional or an unconstitutional prior restraint of a constitutionally protected right.
We've had a problem here in Las Vegas. We had the 72-hour waiting period on your first handgun. And several times people have come into the store and expressed the need to buy a gun immediately, and a handgun, because something happened to them, a threat or burglary or whatever, robbery. And we said, okay, yeah, no problem, fine. We'll take all your paperwork, come back in 72 hours again. And they were like, what? 70? I don't need it day after tomorrow. I need it now.
If they don't already have a registered pistol or a concealed firearm permit, we still have the 1950s cooling off period where they, even though we do the federal and state background checks, they still have to have that kind of sit and think about what.
Show their registration card, and then they can take it with them if they pass the background check. But if it's their first handgun purchase, no, they get it 72 hours. Yep. So sometimes they'll buy a shotgun in the meantime, instead of the handgun. But we've had a problem with that for forever.
I think this is an example of a well-intentioned law going awry. As you said, we have that law here in Las Vegas, but for the 72 hours, but it's only for handguns. It's not for rifles. But I think what's happening in California is there is a constant march on gun rights there. It is like, okay, somebody is sitting in the state senate and trying to think of new ways just to justify their existence and to target gun owners, and so they are creating law after law, trying to wear people down. And I think this is an example of government overreach.
And of course, the devil in any of these types of laws are in the details. The California 10-day waiting period goes back quite a ways, just like the Nevada law goes back a very long time, which is funny because thinking about it, you only had a 3-day wait on your first firearm purchase. I remember when I bought my first handgun, I waited the 3 days. I bought my second one, they said, if you got a blue card, showed them a blue card, boom. And that was prior to Brady, so there was no phone call to anybody. It's just I did the 4473, and out the door I went. So it seemed kind of goofy to me. The California is even worse because, for example, it's a hodgepodge of laws. and they don't always mesh. If you do a private sale to a relative, you have to take the relative and the gun to law enforcement. They do the background check on the relative. If you do a private sale to another person, no background check. If you buy a gun from a gun dealer, 10-day wait. So it's
The more credible the source, the longer they make you wait to get it.
It's really this crazy, and like a lot of states, they really can't point to any crime that says, okay, we foiled a crime by making somebody wait 10 days to take their Beretta ELL $10,000 shotgun home. Or
But that's not the intention, Mike. The intention clearly here is to erode the rights of gun owners.
that's exactly what Judge Ishii said. Based
He's a smart
upon
guy.
he is a very smart guy. Based upon the most recent Supreme Court rulings in McDonald and Heller, which have established the Second Amendment as a core fundamental right. It's been fully incorporated to the states through the 14th Amendment and through the Due Process Clause. It is now clearly not part of the militia. It has nothing to do with military service. It has to do with personal protection. There's a raft of lawsuits out there now that are going to work their way through the system saying that if we have a right to protect ourselves with a firearm in our home, that right travels with us outside of the home. Recently, a case that mirrors this, in California, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals determined that the correct level of scrutiny is intermediate scrutiny on firearms issue. Judge Ishii actually addressed it under two levels, strict scrutiny and intermediate scrutiny, and he found that it failed, the 10-day wait failed on both as prior restraint of a core constitutional privilege, and in an aside said it has nothing to do with actually keeping anybody safe. Because realistically, if you come home and decide that you need a gun to kill your spouse because you caught him in bed with somebody else at 2 in the morning, you're not going to go buy a gun at 2 in the morning. You're not open at 2 in the morning, are you, Bob?
No,
Okay.
especially for that.
Especially for that. So the cooling off period, which is, they all say the same thing. This is to protect people from those immediate violent crimes. 10 days, even a day, especially on a core fundamental right. It's depriving somebody of their right to their Second Amendment rights for 10 days.
And that's precisely what the judge said. I don't like to read from notes on these shows, but this was only an 11-page order, which is amazingly short for this big a case. And he said, the waiting period law prohibits every person who purchases a firearm from taking possession of that firearm for a minimum of 10 days. That is, there is a period of at least 10 days in which California prohibits every person from exercising the right to keep and bear arms. That, from a federal judge, this case is going.
This case is going up. It's absolutely going to go up. It's probably going to get, to the Supreme Court if it does not. Either way, it's going to continue to be challenged. California will not let this go. They're going to chew on this like it's a bone because they stand to have an entire section of their criminal code removed if the Calgun Foundation actually prevails in this lawsuit. And it sure sounds to me like they're well on their way to prevailing.
I wonder if anybody has any statistics to back up any claims of the waiting period causing a decrease in crime, or
This has nothing to do with reality.
I know, but I'm just saying it would be good for Cal Guns Foundation to have some statistics like that, or the police can turn it around and say, well, yes, we did notice a downturn in crime because I don't know how they actually prove it.
I don't think they could ever tie this waiting period to an actual downturn in crime.
And it's not like California has so much cash to spend. I mean, it's not like that this law doesn't cost the taxpayer millions and millions of dollars, both in enacting it and then in enforcing it. So the taxpayer, those few people that actually do pay taxes in California, are really the victims in this thing, besides the innocent people who simply want to exercise their amendment rights.
And there's another level of victim that these waiting periods, our 72-hour period, California's 10-day period, other states' periods, have always bothered me because The people who need to buy a gun without a weight most tend to be the victims of domestic violence and other violent crimes. He's going to get out of jail, you know this, you've put plenty of people in jail for this. He's going to get out in 12 to 24 hours and he's going to be just as mad, or she's going to be just as mad. You run down to the gun store because some officer said, hey, we can't always be here. You might want to think about getting a gun. They walk in and they walk up to Tony and say, I'd like to buy a gun that I can protect myself. You ever had one before? Nope, you got to wait.
Yeah.
And then what do? You sell them a shotgun or
Shotgun.
something, right?
Yeah.
So these are the people who need to be able to purchase a firearm without waiting an extended period of time. It's not the guy who's going to commit the crime. It's the one who's going to defend themselves, as we know. Good guys with guns stop bad guys with all weapons. And that's what it hurts.
We're running out of time here. This is such an issue, but I'd like to say a couple things before we break. In Nevada, we tend to look at California sometimes and make jokes about their laws and how good we are. We have the same waiting period thing here with handguns. And I'd like to commend the CalGuns organization. It's chaired by a gentleman named Gene Hoffman. Second Amendment Foundation, Alan Gottlieb's organization, is involved in this also, and 3 individual plaintiffs, including a guy named Jeff Sylvester, who the case is named after now. It's Sylvester versus Harris. Kamala Harris is the Attorney General in California. And God bless you folks for fighting this thing, and anything we can do to help, holler. We'll be back right after these messages. Don't go away.
More discussion on guns, politics, and self-defense when we come back on Fired Up.
This paranoia that legislators seem to have, everybody can jump on this bandwagon and sound like they're a concerned politician if they attack the gun issues.
And we are back here on Fired Up. Starting January 1st, probably after this show airs, again in California, we have a new law requiring firearms dealers keep records on long gun sales, as they currently do with handgun sales, and to report them to a state database. This is part of a law that was, I think,
it was actually passed in 2011, and like a lot of laws, they did like a 3-year set out, so it goes into effect in 2014. Shouldn't be confused with the registration of certain other long guns that already exist. This is for every rifle that gets sold. Your kid's Chipmunk 22 trainer, or a Garand that you bought to shoot in the CMP program. All of these are now going to be reported to the state.
So they put the law into effect later so that the politicians could go run and hide before it actually came into effect?
yes, they voted this in 3 years ago.
Like, we're going to wait. We're going to take some heat off of ourselves. We're going to go hang out over here.
Some of them probably are not even in office
Yeah,
anymore.
and to an extent, they passed it. There was, this uptick of anger, and then everyone was like, oh, well, it's going to be 2014. We'll do something about it.
Actually,
now here it is.
I think it's great. They're going to be able to cross-check aliens, undocumented workers, prescriptions for mental patients, veterans under PTSD, Republicans.
And that's exactly what it is.
Anybody else they don't like, too. They can cross-check everything. Yeah?
They're going to actually be able to turn these records over to special groups that do nothing but look at these new records and say, aha, we now have a sale of a rifle to so-and-so. He's on this list over here for whatever reason.
Let's go get
the gun.
There
We
you
don't
go.
think he should have that gun. Yeah, he didn't. He passed a background check. He passed the 10-day waiting period, assuming it's still legal in the state at the point. But we don't think he should have that firearm because we have a single sheet of paper from somebody, a doctor or somebody, saying he may have this issue. Yes, exactly.
This is California once again waging war on their citizens, and this puts the police in a really bad position, because police officers are they're given a charter, but at the same time we try to forge relationships with the people that we serve. Well, if you make the people and legitimate gun owners are generally people that like the police. Well, now, if you make an enemy because of a statutory requirement you make an enemy between a good citizen and its police, all that does is erode the fundamentals of our society.
It certainly does. My problem with this is, I like it when politicians come out and tell the truth. There's been a few politicians over the last 20 years who, after they get elected to either state or even federal offices, and then they actually do what they said they were going to do in their campaign, the media goes, holy cow, they're actually trying to do, we didn't believe they were going to do that stuff. Well, the problem is, when laws like this are passed, quite often they get a lot of support from, and you'll understand this having been an officer, every officer understands that the bosses aren't necessarily like the line officers. They make political decisions. And so they got a lot of support from certain law enforcement, and their arguments were, this will just allow us to return stolen firearms to people. It'll allow us to track where those stolen things go, and it's better for everyone all the way around. Of course, that was before they instituted these cross-checking procedures to look at all these other lists of prohibited individuals. All laudable, but in the end, it's just creating a list. And I tend to be suspicious when the government wants to create lists of things that are legal today, but have been in somebody's sights for the future, right? So you live long enough, you'll see them start doing things that you don't like done with that list.
Well, yeah, and we're going to have a list. They're going to have a list. Now, they're only starting out with the rifles that are sold now. This one doesn't require register previous rifles.
If I were a betting man,
You think that's
I would
next?
say
If.
that in a couple of years,
Yeah, and all
gonna-
this one requires, and I just thought of this, and Bob, you'll probably know better, but doesn't the federal regulations surrounding the 4473 prohibit you from giving that information out? You have to maintain it, but
We
Yes.
have to maintain it, right?
We have to maintain
So-
it. This will
is state
require
law,
they
obviously.
report it. The
Right.
state law will require they report the sales to the state DOJ.
but it would be illegal if
And-
you reported this to the Fed, right?
Well, we're going to be the same position we had with other bills that were floating here in our legislature, where we couldn't obey it because we'd be violating the other guy's law.
Yeah.
We went through this here in Nevada. We had a bill in the legislature that said we're going to do some kind of goofy state background check system that was more involved than the Brady. And actually the federal law says we can't do that. We can't use the federal information for anything. We can't give it out. And we were supposed to, under the new state law, we were supposed to report certain people to the state government because they bought a gun. And fortunately, it finally died in the assembly because it put us in a position where we had to either violate law A or law B, and we could choose to violate the state law or the federal law. And whichever one we didn't do, they'd come down and jerk our license because we have a state license as well as a federal license. So we got to pick who was going to put us out of business.
this paranoia that legislators seem to have, it's like a pet project. Everybody can jump on this bandwagon and sound like they're a concerned politician if they attack the gun issues. And common sense never seems to play a role, and the legitimacy of good citizens being able to protect themselves never seems to play a role. And that's really what the basis of the entire Constitution is about.
Yeah, a concern that I always have, because as California goes legally, we tend to follow along. We have a very young system of law in Nevada, not a lot of jurisprudence, not a lot of history. California's got more. Back east has a ton more. But there are a few jurisdictions that tend to drive the bus, so to speak, or as a friend of mine likes to say, they're the petri dish of bad ideas. And that's what this is. They'll get this on, and in a few years, somebody here will latch onto, well, it works over in California. It's doing wonderful things over there. All anecdotal. They won't be able to point to any one case. They'll just say, well, look, they've had their list for 5 years now, and they're not collecting up the guns. The unsaid word, of course, is yet. So,
But they are. I mean, California is actively doing that already. So that we have this thing with PTSD from our returning veterans that is hitting again if they go to the VA for treatment and they say, I have these problems and I need to talk to a doctor or get some medication, they're immediately going to be on California's list and lose their guns. And they're not, we're making laws that have nothing to do with stopping criminals. We used to wait till the guy committed a crime before we'd arrest him or take his guns away, because it's a constitutional right to possess firearms. And this has gotten to the point where it is any excuse to take any firearm away from anybody. And this, what's going to go on in California, I know it's going to be over here in nothing flat. So,
and you know, it's this slow erosion which sneaks up on people. And then, you know, you got to remember that most of our citizenry, unfortunately, is so deluged with news and with what's going on in their communities that it's very difficult to keep up on all of these laws. So they don't understand how they actually are affected by them.
The politicians who write the laws don't even know oftentimes what's in the laws. I mean, a California politician, we have to pass it to know what's in it kind of a thing. But California, unlike Nevada, has a full-time legislature. These people do nothing. It's their job to go write laws and to add to and amend the laws. You know, programs like this, the people in California watching this show, this may be the first time they've heard of this, because you're right. It's not. This isn't going to be front page news in the LA Times.
Exactly.
It's not on the nightly news.
It's going to be passed in the back like they did in the SAFE Act in New York. It's going to be passed at midnight.
On a voice vote, the dark of the night.
Midnight, nobody there, nobody to object.
Well, and we have them picking up guns in New York now that were legal when the guys bought them, and now they're illegal. Right. And we're going to have them being picked up in California after the 1st. It'll take them a day or two to get their act together on the list and so forth, but this is going the wrong direction. And we used to look at California and say, boy, you're in trouble, but we had the same thing tried here. The only advantage we have in Nevada is our legislature is only in session for 120 days a year, every other year. So they can't hurt us as much. We'll be back after these messages. Don't go away.
We'll have more Fired Up when we come back.
We're going to be talking about the PPS 43.
Where you're busted by your own mom.
Hey, we're back here on Fired Up with Bob. We're at Pro Gun Club for the Firearms Fair, sponsored by Surefire Institute, and I'm here with Troy Arce, the chief instructor for the Surefire Institute here at the Firearms Fair. What kinds of things can the viewers expect when they come out here and take a class with you?
Well, we offer world-class firearms instruction. We have instructors from all over the world that teach tactical firearms training, tactical medicine, and different types of disciplines. We offer training to the military and law enforcement. Our bread and butter is the low light operator course, which we teach to several law enforcement agencies across the nation.
Now, do you teach that to civilians as well? Because one of the things we're always talking about on the show is being prepared to defend yourself and your loved ones. And as you know, the vast majority of self-defense shootings in the home happen after dark at night in a darkened house. Mm-hmm. So can a civilian come out and take that course?
Absolutely. You know, we like to get everybody involved, every responsible gun owner and all the gun vendors here, to get together and work as a community. And I think self-defense is it's a huge issue. We live in a perilous society, and we want to make sure we get that education out to as many as we can.
That is great. I have one of the questions a lot of my clients call me and ask is, I want to take one of these classes at one of the big schools, but I'm not really a very good shooter. I mean, I know how to load my firearm, I know how to shoot safely, but I'm not like one of these military or law enforcement kind of guys. Can any skill level shooter come out and take a class and gain something from it?
Absolutely. We take children, anybody that's never handled a firearm, we can take them from taking it right out of the box, from basic, taking it apart, cleaning it, fundamental training, all the gun handling, marksmanship, And we base it off of mental conditioning as well, and teaching people the right skill sets and the right mindset to handle themselves in a lethal confrontation.
Now, I would presume that you teach in segments, so basic firearms might be one segment, and then low light might be a segment, that sort of thing. And well, this is a great opportunity you have. Come out here and see Troy and his team of instructors. Get those skills that you might need to save your life. Troy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming out. Appreciate it.
Okay, here we are at the Firearms Fair at Pro Gun Club, and we have a very unique product here. It's the Hilseback dual rate buffer spring. And this is Dan Hilseback, the owner and operator of the company, and he's going to fill you in a little bit. How you doing, Dan?
Tony. Thank you very much for coming by here. We're promoting the dual rate buffer spring today. We titled the product Flatline. It's a patent pending spring system for the AR-15 carbine length buffer tube system. It's a dual rate system eliminating muzzle rise and muzzle flip at the front of the barrel. We're able to run full auto machine guns, running it on open palm without having the barrel jump off your hand at all. I'm going to demonstrate here the product, how we would install the rifle. It's a 3-part system. We have a short buffer spring that will go in the very back. You're going to follow it up by a hollow spacer. Then you're going to follow it up with our main operating spring, reusing whatever factory buffer you have in the gun all the way up to an H2 buffer. We're eliminating virtually all of the muzzle lift at the front of the gun, virtually all of the sideways muzzle flip on the front. We're reducing about 10% of the recoil at the buttstock of the gun. The product was intentionally designed specific to the .223 caliber round, 5.56 chambered for these guns. It'll work with M4 series AR-15 style rifles. Hopefully soon in the future we're going to be unveiling them for the AK and the AR-10 variants as well.
You're going to do, you said you're also working on a full-length buffer too, right?
We're also looking on a rifle-length buffer tube as well for this product.
Okay. We picked up a couple of units and we're actually running them at the gun store right now, a little beta test to see how they go.
Very good.
So far my phone hasn't rung, so apparently they're working pretty good.
Very good.
All right, Dan, good luck.
Thank you very much for coming by today. Appreciate it.
Hi, we're back here on Fired Up with Bob. We're out at Pro Gun Club for the Firearms Fair presented by Surefire Institute. I'm here with Hans Vang, the CEO and co-founder of Vangcomp. They build tactical shotguns, and we're going to break a little bit of news here. They are now in a collaborative partnership with Surefire Institute, so they're going to be bringing even better products and training for you. Hans, why don't you tell us a little bit about why your shotgun should be in everybody's gun safe?
Well, I think the biggest thing is with a shotgun is called reliability. Also accuracy. We make a barrel that we take your barrel and modify it by backboring the barrel, lengthening the forcing cone, and putting a series of holes in it. What you get for that is you get a 10 to 12 inch group at 25 to 35 yards. You get a reduction in recoil by 10 to 15%, and the nighttime muzzle flash is reduced by at least 50%.
So now you're building this on my gun. So if I bring you an 870 or a 500, you can build on either of those
Sure, no
models?
problem at all.
Is there a specific model that is better?
We actually have 3 models we probably use. The 500 Mossberg, the 590, 590A1, the 870, and also the 870P. We do the Expresses and the Police Magnums on those.
Now I notice on the shotgun you're holding, you have a ghost ring sight, and I think it's a night sight Trijicon front blade on that.
Correct. That's actually an XS small dot tritium. The front sights we put on our shotguns are very similar to the AR style sight. So if you're familiar with those, you got elevation in there. So when the tritium goes dead, it's not when it's going to go dead, when it will definitely go dead. It's just screw in, screw out, and it's very unique here. The rear sight, if you notice, it's all made out of one piece of aluminum. A lot of guys will make this one piece, that one piece. We decided when I designed the stuff to do it this way. Structurally and cosmetically it works better. The other thing that's really critically important, you see this gun has a 2-shot tube extension in it. Everybody else in the industry makes them out of 3 or 4 pieces of metal. This starts out weighing 2 pounds, we get done, it weighs 10 ounces.
Wow.
It's made out of solid bar stock. Another little trick item we do is make a nice little dome-headed safety.
Nice.
Yeah, that works out really great. Especially if you have gloves on, you can feel it. It really works great. The other one may be a little hard to see here is we have a stainless steel magazine fouler. It's got little grooves around the outside, stainless steel. It doesn't get affected by dirt, debris, and crud in the gun base.
And I see you have an overmold on the forestock.
Oh, yes.
Slip-free there?
Oh, yeah, very much so. These are our favorite guys in the world, Hogue Industries. They've been making stuff for over 30, 35 years. Family-owned business, made in America. We love Hogue products.
Well, as you know, Tony likes the 870 Sledge-O-Matic, as he likes to call it. It slices, it dices for home defense and for self-defense. and you should look into a home defense or personal defense shotgun too. Talk to the guys over here at Van Comp. They will build you the absolute best tactical shotgun, and you need to have something like that in your arsenal.
Hi, this is Tony with the Gun Store in Las Vegas. Tonight we're going to be talking about the PPS-43, which is a Russian submachine gun. During the Winter War with Finland, the Russians copied the Finnish Suomi, basically with the drum, and they developed the Papashaw, which is a PPS-H41, which we did on a prior show. That gun took about 7.5 hours to build. And during the war, they really needed to get guns faster, build them faster. So this gun was called the Hero of Leningrad. The Germans had Leningrad totally surrounded, and the factory that built this gun was in the center of Leningrad, and they actually developed this gun prior to that, but they were actually field testing it on the front lines. They would get the guns out of the factory, and they would give them to the troops defending Leningrad. Now this gun here, they did a completely revamp. The only thing that is the same thing, except for the PPS-41, is the ammunition. The Russians used the 7.62 by 25 bottlenecked cartridge, very high velocity, and the PPS-H41, the Papashaw, fired at an extremely high rate of fire, and they had the drums. When they developed this gun, they cut the manufacturing time down from 7.5 hours to about 2.5 hours. They were cranking one of these out every 2.5 hours. And it is a very, very crudely made. You can see it's all sheet steel, right? There's no selector on it. It's strictly a full auto only. It had a folding stock, and it didn't have the drum magazine. It fired only from the box magazine. Now the PPS-41, had a single stack magazine, double feed, single load, and it was very difficult to load the cartridges in there. You actually needed a tool. When they developed this, they used a double-sided or double feed magazine, and it's very simple, very easy to load the cartridges in there. You didn't need a tool, so that was a big advantage to that. This gun here, they slowed the rate of fire down a little bit from the Papashaw, and the sights are more realistic. There is up to about 200 meters, which is still optimistic for a submachine gun. But they built this gun all the way through the war. A lot of the communist bloc countries used the gun after the war, and it is still in production in some third world countries today. We're going to shoot this gun. Again, it's strictly a blowback type action, very crude, and you'll notice that the rate of fire is not quite as high as the previous PPS-H41, but it is still quite an effective gun. Highly ugly, but it served the purpose. Okay, we're going to load it up. I don't have a completely full magazine, but we're going to try a couple short bursts, and then we'll let her rip and see what happens. Insert it in, and here we go. As you can see, of course, the rate of fire is a lot slower. It's much more controllable. They have like a built-in, very crude compensator over here to keep the muzzle from rising, and it was very, very controllable, and it was very good for dirt and foreign particles. It's very, very reliable, and that's what the Russians needed. In fact, they only recommended cleaning them about between 500 and 1,000 rounds, which is incredible. But finally did the job. Not a finely made weapon, but it served the purpose for what they needed.
Where you're busted by your own mom.
Hello, I'm the Moron of the Week. I'm Mike Rogers from the Gun Store, and it's time to get entertained and amazed by the morons that exist in the world.
And good evening. A Brandon man sits in jail after a failed robbery attempt. He has his mother to thank for that.
She stopped him actually during the middle of his crime, taking away his weapon he had aimed at the clerk.
David Kinney shows us how it all went down in tonight's top story.
It was around 11:30 a.m. Tuesday when 22-year-old Roy Mitchell entered Dee's one-stop convenience store on Highway 80 in Brandon. Mitchell quickly grabs some nacho cheese Doritos and throws them on the counter. He then hands the clerk $2 to pay for his snack, but then things change dramatically. As she goes to get his change, he goes in his waistband and pulls out a gun. He then points it directly at the clerk and demands all the money in the cash drawer. The cashier doesn't move, as if in shock. Then a case of maternal intervention. Mitchell's mother walks up, grabs the gun, and orders him out of the store. He obeys, leaving with no cash, but he does get his chips. As mom tries to explain to the clerk that the gun wasn't real, begging her not to call the law, she leaves and does just the opposite, calling police to the scene. Mitchell and his mother leave in a red Oldsmobile. A bolo went out for the car, and a short time later, it was stopped by Pelahatchie police, and Mitchell was taken into custody. Officers found a gun in the vehicle. Turns out it was a fake, a plastic replica made to look like the real thing. Mitchell is facing attempted armed robbery charges in addition to the embarrassment of having surveillance video of a heist attempt shown on the evening news where you're busted by your own mom.
No training value here, folks. It's just funny. Gotta call that some good parenting, though. Next lesson should be maybe don't do armed robberies, but you gotta give him credit. He kept his finger off the trigger through the whole process.
Is the gun I choose going to be a factor in whether I'm charged with a crime or not? As odd as it may seem, it can be. Is the gun I choose going to be a factor in whether I'm charged with a crime or not? As odd as it may seem, it can be. The firearm you choose to carry and why you chose it may factor into a civil or criminal case. For example, if you picked a gun because somebody said it kills better than every other firearm, and the allegation is that you intentionally killed another human being, that might get put in front of a jury, and you don't know how they're going to react to it. So the real issue is, how do you select a firearm for personal defense? The simple answer is, buy a quality firearm from a major manufacturer that you shoot well. Overall, it's going to be far more important if you accurately and effectively use the firearm than what kind of firearm it is. Stay away from calibers that cause juries to cringe, and in this regard, I'm thinking of anything that's not a common caliber carried by law enforcement. By and large, you don't need a fancy firearm to defend your life. What you need is a safe, reliable, defensible firearm. We're going to talk a little bit more about modifications to your firearm in a future segment.
Welcome back to Fired Up. We're going to hit an issue here that is interesting to us and may not be to everyone out there, but we're talking about firearms trusts and the ability that people have to create a trust to own their firearms so they can be passed along to the next generation without going through the estate stuff. And particularly with what we call an NFA trust. It is a trust that contains National Firearms Act registered weapons, which are machine guns, silencers, short barrel rifles, short barrel shotguns, basically anything that shoots a bullet that doesn't look like a gun. Generally, we're talking about machine guns here, and it's a controversial subject now.
You mean they're legal?
They are. People actually, they'll come into the store from someplace where they aren't legal, because this is federal law. The National Firearms Act of 1934 was the first time the federal government actually came in and regulated firearms. Prior to this, you could walk into the hardware store and buy a Thompson machine gun and walk out of the store with it. You could call up Winchester and order firearms and have them delivered through the mail. And actually that was still legal until the Gun Control Act of '68. But so the NFA trusts are in there, short barrel shotguns, machine guns, short barrel rifles, suppressors, things like that. And that's where the complication comes in, because federally you're allowed to possess these things. Some states say you can have this but not that. You can have this if it's old enough, but you can't have a modern one. And some states that say, yes, you can have these things, have chief law enforcement officers who are supposed to sign off and say, yes, this person can possess this, who simply flat refuse to sign the paperwork.
Well,
And
that's
so,
it too. And the trusts were started to allow transfers in area where the trusts were set up to, because you get so many sheriffs now, they have to sign the Form 4, stating that you are eligible to own said weapon. They are not signing it to say, oh, he's a hell of a guy, and I'm giving my okay. He's just saying that Randy has never committed a crime, and we can't find anything in his background to prohibit him from owning said firearm. But a lot of law enforcement agencies or law enforcement officers, chiefs, won't sign. So they established a trust because now the gun is not in the individual's name; it's in a trust. And now this has been going on for a long time. And just recently is what the problem has come up is that the trust, the government are saying, well, people are getting the trustees, not the owner of the trust, but the trustees could have possession of a gun, a machine gun, that they would be ineligible to own. So they've opened up a can of worms on this, and it's really getting out of control. I just came back from Phoenix, in which the ATF was invited to the NFATCA, which is the National Firearms Trade Collectors Association, to speak on this issue, and they didn't show. So
wow.
Yeah, and so it's coming down. There's a comment period on the internet regarding this bill, and we don't know what's going to happen because a lot of our customers have trusts. You do trust.
I do trust, and I have a trust.
You have a trust.
You know, this is one of those, and I didn't do it like probably the vast majority of people who have corporation ownership or trust ownership. In my particular case, and in most of the cases I set them up for, the idea is that you and I can be in a trust together. Either of us can be in possession of the firearm because we're both trustees of the trust. Right. Under a normal situation, the firearm is registered to Tony D. I know you have several of these things. Right. You can't hand it to me to take it to the range, nope, even if I'm a trustworthy person.
Nope.
I can't call you up and say, I'm doing a demonstration. You have to be there with the firearm. Physically. And so with a corporation like the gun store, with a person who trains with these things like I do and with the other people in the trust do, in order for that item to travel, one of us must be in physical possession. The trust just makes it easier to do that.
Right. But generally speaking, let me ask you a question. When people set up trust, is it for to pass on firearms to their children? As in estates?
It can be.
Is that the norm?
Well, because here's what happens. If you own a Class 3 item in your own name on the Form 4 and you die, your estate has a couple of options. Somebody can go in and transfer it to themselves. And remember, this is a tax issue. This isn't even a law enforcement issue. The NFA is a tax measure. In order to get that item, you paid $200, and on a piece of paper, there's a stamp that says you paid $200, just like you went and bought a stamp for an envelope. They have to go and register that item. There's a provision to allow them to do it easily, but they got to jump through the hoops. Whereas, when I pass, the trustees in my trust, they still own the item. They don't have to go to the federal government and say, oh, he died suddenly in his sleep. We need to do something with this.
A good friend of mine passed away about 10 years ago, and he was a big collector, and he had over 60 machine guns, and they were all in his name, not in a trust. And we had to sit there and do 60 Form 4s to transfer them all to his wife. But they were all, they do give you a free transfer on a death. But the trust, it's a good thing, but it's very confusing. And a lot of attorneys, we've had a lot of trusts come back that the ATF will not accept. And it's very confusing unless you get it right. Once you get it right, it's a good thing.
But you could see the potential for abuse here.
Well, that's okay. That's where they said, oh well, the trustees could. If you are going to set up a trust, right, and the average machine gun is in 4 figures, it could be 5 figures. So we're talking very expensive items, and I don't think you're going to try and circumvent the system. So someone on your trust or your trustee, you're going to risk everything so he can have possession of an M16. That doesn't make sense.
As importantly, if somebody's going to jump through the hoops to do a trust or form a corporation to buy one of these items, and somebody comes to them and says, hey, I'm not allowed to have this stuff, but if you put me on your trust, then I can play with your stuff and I can have the stuff, that individual sitting there saying, gee, let me think about this. I'm going to put you on the trust. I'm going to violate the federal law. It's 10 years and $100,000 or $250,000 or whatever the fine is. Yeah, sure. I'm going to throw you in my trust as a trustee. Exactly. My house and my car and everything else.
Go to jail.
Right. It's just, this is another one of those places where I can come up with a lot of scenarios where, yes, somebody could do something wrong, but no one can actually really point to one where it's happened. There have been a few times where anecdotally somebody says, oh, well, we found out that this trust had a felon in it. Okay. How many felons do you know are out there with a gun anyway? It's an outlier in the extreme, and probably that individual may have thought they had a legal right to possess the firearms for what age of the felony, didn't realize they couldn't have. I don't know. Most of the people who have these corporations and trusts are law-abiding. They're playing by the rules. Maybe their chief law enforcement officer refuses to sign off. We had one here locally who years ago had a problem with suppressors but not machine guns. Later on, I understand, he started signing for suppressors too. But
so what you're saying in effect is that we're giving actually petty politicians the ability, and elected officials, police chiefs and sheriffs, the ability to circumvent the federal law.
Yeah, they create a Class 3 free zone in their jurisdiction that there can be no legal machine guns there.
No evil.
So the ATF started this program, and they do the background checks on these trusts, and the local sheriff doesn't know, or the local police chief doesn't know, but it's none of his business. It's a privately owned gun. To me, this is just like any other gun registration thing where the sheriff has to give you permission to own this type of gun. Now, understand, the gun is not illegal in his state. He's making it illegal in his county or his city by saying, I won't sign this.
And now we got to see what's going to happen now, because there are thousands and thousands of trusts that are already in existence now. Now, are they going to have to go back and do background checks on every trustee in all of those thousands and thousands? Or are they going to be grandfathered in, and then from now on forward, are they going to do it? It's a really big issue in the Class 3 community. And I'm telling you, I have no idea what's going to happen.
And the viewers need to understand, Tony, it's so fresh that even the ATF doesn't know yet.
No.
They just closed.
They won't know for years.
Well, they just closed the comment section, and now they're going to start deciding what to do about this. It'll be a very long time, and then it'll slide in. It's an up in the air issue, but it's an important one, because this is the stepping stone to saying other things.
This is the same problem of they're making a law retroactively to police something that's already been taking place for years, and now they're writing the laws. So it's kind of scary. Yeah. We're unfortunately out of time for this program. Once more, we will be back next week, same time, same station. I appreciate you watching. Have a good week.